that we're going to do a repair and a reinforcement on. From what I understand, I think this was only sold in like Belgium, so it's not a real common tiger. But we've got a couple of curves that are problematic. One of them is under the neck, and that's actually blown out right now, so that's a good probably 15 inches or so that we'll have to repair. And during the repair, that's basically going to get reinforced, so that's good, because that needs to be reinforced. And then while we're in there, while that's open, on the back side of the neck, we've also got this curve right here that needs to be reinforced. So since it's open, we can go ahead and do that from the inside. So what I'm going to do is figure out how much material I need, and I'm going to go ahead and do this one here on the back of the neck first. Basically, I'm going to kind of start on the straight and then go around this curve. I'd say probably a good 12 inches should do it. So I'll put that aside for just a second. Take some material that I've got here. This is a thicker 0.4 millimeter material, so this should be really good for reinforcement, especially for this individual. They like to ride pretty hard. So what I want to do is I try to get a strip that's about 3/4 of an inch. And looks like I can go a little bit longer than 12. And I want to try to get the best out of this weird piece of material I've got here. It's had some circles and things cut out of it. Looks like I can get almost 15 inches out of it. Take my rotary cutter. And then I can kind of use my grid here on my cutting board. It's divided up into 1/2-inch squares. So I can basically kind of take that, align it with that, and then go about halfway in between one of these squares, and it's going to give me the 3/4 of an inch. So that'll be my first strip right here. This is actually quite a bit longer than I really need. This is about 15 inches, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and trim it up. I'm going to round off this end. Cut it down to 12 inches, round off this end. Move those guys out of the way, and then put that aside so I don't lose it. So I want to put most of the weight of this toy up on the table, so I don't have to worry about it kind of like gravity pulling it to the floor. I think what I want to do, it's kind of hard to see where the curve of this starts and stops. So what I'm going to do is I'll actually go ahead and mark this. Since it's transparent, I'll be able to see. I could have done this earlier actually, but this way I can start on one end and work towards the other. And I kind of know where I'm supposed to be starting and stopping from. I'm going to also go ahead and tape this right here. That's going to keep that rip from opening more. Once it tears along a factory seam, it's so easy for it to just keep running. And I'd rather not fix more than I need to. I'd rather keep this from traveling. Another option is I could go ahead and actually glue some clear material just kind of as a stop, but I think this will be okay. So what I'm trying to do is get in and see if I can see my start and stop points. So there's my start point. they're both right over the black. Well, that's okay. Let's do this. I was hoping I'd be able to see it, but what I can do is as long as I have one end, I can work my way towards the other end. But actually, you know what? It's going to be a whole lot easier if I start from this other end, because I like to kind of work towards me. When I have the syringe, I can get to the back side of the strip that I'm gluing. So let's mark this one down here. You probably can't really see this with the camera. It's kind of up inside. All right. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and remove these guys from the outside. Masking tape has a tendency of leaving sticky residue if you leave it on too long, and it's easier to take it off now and avoid that, having to clean it up. All right, so might have to kind of adjust my camera angle a bit here to kind of see what I'm doing. Apologize for the bouncing. This thing is a giant gooseneck clamp for my phone, and it's attached to a light, so it has a tendency to kind of wiggle and shake. So now we can see I'll be starting back down there and working my way back this direction. Now what I'm going to do is take a paper towel in some alcohol. And I'm going to clean that first. Make sure that I get a good bond. This is 91% isopropyl. And then I'm going to do the same thing on my strip that I'm about to glue too, because this has just been sitting around. It's some leftover material from something else. All right. So before I start, I'm going to make sure I got what I need ready. So I got a brayer roller and deciding if I want to roll against just this flat surface. I think I'll be all right. Alternatively, I could put a jar under it. And let's see if that, just curious, so I'll put it under there and kind of see how that looks. It might might help or it might get in the way. Let me see if it might actually. Might kind of prop things at a better angle. Yeah, I think I might actually go with that. It definitely helps when you have real steep curves to deal with, real tight curves, I guess. This is not quite as tight, but it looks like it's still going to work out better. So I got my brayer roller, I got my strip, I got my glue, HH66. Should have enough there. I'll probably have to refill in a minute. But it should have enough to at least do this first strip. And then it's always nice to have a paper towel in case I need to wipe up any excess glue. So let's do one thing first, actually. I'm going to see if I have a different jar. One thing that bothers me about this jar is it's got a label on it. This ink can always transfer to vinyl. Let me see if I have it without a label on it. I do. One problem is it's got some residue on it. What I'm going to do, I do this a lot. The jar I've been using is inside of something that's inflated right now that I'm testing, so I've lost my normal jar. It's always good to have more than one, though. Instead of fooling with trying to get all that adhesive off of there, you can just roll it in tape. So now we don't have to worry about any kind of print coming off onto the vinyl. All right. So here we are. roller, got my paper towel. Got my tea. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put some glue just on the tip of this to get it anchored. I'm going to go a little slower and do a little bit less at a time since this is a transparent toy. Since we'll be able to see everything very clearly, especially in the clear areas. Behind the black, not quite as much, but we might as well just try to keep it all nice and consistent and clean. So instead of doing a longer run, what I'll probably do is about an inch at a time. So I'm going to peel this back just a little bit where I can see my glue, and I'm going to get about an inch and spend basically just a little more time on making sure it's very evenly distributed. Just kind of make sure that I got it coated from left to right. And as I lay it down, I kind of push forward. In fact, you can kind of even roll it this direction. Put some paper towel to catch any of the glue that comes out. I'm gonna actually kind of rub off my brayer roller here. It's got some various glue and stuff. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. Having the gloves actually really helps because they're grippy. These are nitrile gloves. Protect my hands from the glue. All right, basically just continue on. So we got a couple inches down, peel it back. Do another inch. Make sure it's edge to edge. And then kind of roll it forward. And the thing about this glue is it's workable for quite a while. So if something goes wrong, you can peel it up and you can continue to kind of, roll it and work out any bubbles. pull it back. Put another inch on. And really, the length that you do is just dependent on how much time you need to spend with each section, because the glue starts to set up and you really want to put it down while it's still wet, especially on this clear material, because that's the only way to really make it look nice, is if it goes down wet, because you can push all the air out. Some people will kind of treat it like contact cement, where you, or really like rubber cement, the way you typically will glue latex, and put it on both halves, let it set up for a minute or so, and then put it together. That works with this vinyl cement as well, but the problem is once it goes down, that's it. You can't really do a whole lot with it. So putting it down wet gives you the ability to work out wrinkles and air bubbles and such. The trade-off is that you have to kind of work with it for about a minute, and while it's kind of setting up, but it ends up looking more clear if you're doing clear material, if you put it down wet. If you're doing things that are real curved, it's also very useful to put it down wet, because you can work with it for a little bit longer. So it just really kind of depends on what you're doing. Neither way is wrong. It's all about, you know, different techniques and how they're useful for certain applications. Also, clamping down what you're gluing is sometimes very useful. I find that it's not necessary when you're doing things like this, using the roller, and as long as you roll it, you know, quite a few times to give it the pressure that it needs to bond, then it's sufficient. Clamping's not a bad idea, especially if it's like a weird kind of bond, you know, some strange angles of material coming together. Sometimes that's really helpful. Or if you're gluing over something that's a big bump, you know, that causes an uneven joint, then clamping it is really very useful. If you ever have to bond to material like a zipper, if you can't get a zipper that's got vinyl, then you absolutely have to kind of clamp it. You can see there's a little bit of where the glue has kind of come out from the edges, and I wiped it up. What I'll do is before I seal this up, I'm going to come in here with a Q-tip and just do a little, not a lot, but just a little bit of acetone to kind of clean that up, since you'll be able to see that from the outside, especially on the clear parts there, the orange parts. I mean, it's turning out so pretty. We don't want to. Now, anything that's loose, you can use your gloves and actually just kind of rub it. But if it's kind of bonded, then you got to use the acetone. So it looks like we're maybe almost about halfway on this. What I do is I don't want it to bunch up back in here, because it takes a good hour for this glue to really kind of set up. So I'm going to kind of pull it back so that it's kind of sitting flat. So it's kind of back up in there flat. One thing I find is that it's always all about how the material lays. Is it gonna be real easy to lay down what I'm working on? If it's something that you have to really hold in place, then if something doesn't go right, you're gonna have a hard time trying to manipulate it. If it's already sort of laying the way it's gonna glue, then you're not having to hold it in a position. It's going to be a lot easier to maneuver and manipulate it if you need to. If something starts to misbehave, if it starts to curl or something like that. Right here is I think kind of the curviest part of this curve, like the steepest part, I guess, the crotch of the curve, so to speak. So I can definitely tell that it's in a curved spot right now. And that makes sense because we're about halfway there, so that's about where the steepest part should be if we did it right. It's always a good idea to roll back over the stuff you've done as many times as you can do it over the next, really the first 30 minutes in doing a seam is the most important to apply pressure to it. When I'm rolling it, sometimes I kind of get up on the edge of it too if I need to kind of dig in along like a factory seam. Sometimes I'll even, get in there with my fingernail. Somebody said they wish it was their Tiger. Yeah, me too. This thing's actually pretty cool. It's nice material too, actually. It feels really nice. It's very, very gummy. Nice. It's a nice size too. It's not too big, not too small. I can see why these are highly sought after. It's kind of cool that I'm being entrusted to repair this. Going slow and trying to do my best on it. I'm going to come back here and roll some of this stuff that I've done before. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and get this piece of tape. No point in leaving that on there. I could have actually got that off a while ago. Make sure it doesn't leave any residue. Tell you what, that stuff likes to stick to these nitrile gloves, that painter's tape adhesive. He said that you got a chair from the 60s or 70s. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, I bet that probably feels a bit different. I wonder if it's lost some of its plasticizer over the years. One cool thing is you can actually add plasticizer back in. That's something that I'm actually experimenting with, and I'm going to offer that as a service after doing some of my own, to make sure I've got my technique down. But the latest plasticizer is ATBC, and it's kind of a replacement to some of the phthalates that have been used up till about a decade ago, and actually are still in use in some cases. There are some safe ones, but just the word phthalate scares people, so a lot of people are moving over to alternatives. Really, it's still nice and supple. That is so incredible. I guess it's probably been kept in good, a good environment. I know certain things can definitely draw the plasticizer out, so that's pretty cool. It's possible if it's that old too. It may. They used to actually use like lead and some other things as a softener, and even actually as a plasticizer early on. That I think that kind of went out in the 50s though, honestly. So like probably not. I think they kind of realized that was a bad idea. They still do put some lead in like the pigments and stuff, but it's really, really, really low. So not like what they used to use when it was used as like a plasticizer or even a stabilizer. Yeah, even arsenic I think has been used. I've read. So I've even bought lead test kits that I've done my own testing on these toys, and nothing really shows up. Not the modern ones. I've done Finod toys and Puffy Paws and Inflatable World and Hungy and Bailey, and nobody's stuff really registers on that that I found. I figure as much as I work with it, I would do some of my own testing. I've even done different gas testing to see what all I might potentially be getting exposed to, doing the gluing and doing the just working with the material when the material is brand new. Well, thank you. I try to do nice work. But yeah, I do have some of my own stuff. I'm starting to collect things. All right. Yeah, really the only thing that's dangerous that I have tested is the fumes from the glue. And what I do is I take precautions with using activated carbon air filtering. So I have a filter running right next to me that's basically sucking up all these fumes. I tested for quite a few different things because of some studies that I had read of that they had done with shower curtains, actually. People were complaining about the new shower curtain smell with vinyl when it's brand new. And in some of those studies, they said, they found these certain things. They found toluene and MEK and acetone and phenol and, those things. And so I got a gas test system that they use for like OSHA and did a lot of my own testing, and honestly, like nothing really even registered with the new vinyl. Not at least on the OSHA scale. Did it several times with stuff that was real smelly. The only thing that really shows up is when I'm doing the glue. The fumes from the glue definitely are problematic. So that's really the only thing. Once the glue is dry, of course, when you get something done in, factory made, it's got no glue. It's just welded. So it's really fairly safe material from what I have found so far. The only thing that is bad that I've read is if it ever burns, it can release some really, really nasty stuff. So don't ever burn it. And apparently the precursor to polyvinyl chloride, which is just vinyl chloride monomer, is pretty nasty stuff. But once it turns into polyvinyl chloride, it's pretty much just inert, neutral. And I even tested for that. It was one of the gas tests I did was for vinyl chloride to see if there was any residual leftover, and nothing showed up on that test, at least not on the OSHA scale, which I think went down to like, 1 ppm. So if there was anything there, it was lower than that. And that was on brand new material. Anyway, I just figured as much as I was exposed to it, I'd make sure I'm staying safe. Also, I figured if there was any issues, I'd want to make sure I kept everybody else safe. I want all my kinky friends to be safe. A lot of times what I do is I do this outside when it's nice out. Unfortunately, in Alabama right now, it is like a steam room when you go outside, so not ideal. Most of our crafters are here in this city. We have a few people that work remote from different places. For me, this is just a hobby. It's my passion, and there were enough people interested in what I was doing, so I trained a bunch of other people. Most of them are just crafty people. Some of them were into costuming before they started working with me, or they were into clothing making, or are just good with their hands and interested in learning how to work with this material. During all this COVID stuff, it was great because I was able to keep a bunch of people employed working from home. I don't really do most of the work. I do a little bit here and there, especially when it kind of comes to repairs or, different things. Most of the people that do all the regular work, they do the standard stuff. If it's new or R&D, usually I end up doing it. I have a few other crafters that are good with that kind of stuff too, though. We have one that did a really cool vest that ended up in a museum that's on display in Venice right now, actually. With that one, the only thing I did was help to leak check it. And helped give some perspective and advice on some of the things, but she did all the work. Go back and roll some of this stuff. Readjust my camera here. All right, getting down to the last, looks like 3 inches or so. In fact, I'll go ahead and lose this piece of tape that marked the other end. Using the tape to kind of pull off a little piece here that got stuck. I do that first, and then my next step when I do tape removal is to use some isopropyl alcohol, and then if that doesn't work, I'll use Goo Gone, which works great, but you don't want to leave that on there. You'll want to clean that off with Dawn or rubbing alcohol. Actually, Dawn works a little better though. There you go. Actually, a better tape to use, and the problem is that stuff sticks to these gloves like crazy. I'm going to change my gloves. Gorilla tape works amazing for pulling off adhesive. I actually keep some of that stuff around just for that. Get some new gloves. Problem with changing gloves is your hands are all sweaty from being in the old gloves. You can always dip them in a little bit of cornstarch, which I might actually do that. Cornstarch is awesome stuff. About the only thing you need to do is keep it away from latex because it promotes latex allergies. Works good with PVC though. And nitrile gloves. Yeah, these ones are like unpowdered variety. I should have tried to find some that were powdered. And the problem is they're tight, which I like because I don't want them to get in the way of what I'm working on, but tight with no powder is really kind of a difficult thing to deal with. All right. Always wipe the tip of my needle off if it's been sitting there for a little while, because otherwise it'll have like a kind of hardish clump of glue. And then you can end up tracking that onto what you're trying to glue. So the needle I'm using is an 18 gauge. I really love this size. It's a good flow rate for the HH66 glue. If you leave it out, the glue will dry in the tip, but you can just peel it off the next day. And usually you can use a needle for like a week. So it's kind of nice. You can just kind of keep peeling it off and keep reusing it. I'm getting there. Down to the last little bit. right, I think this will be our last section. And do a little bit of cleanup on this with the acetone and a Q-tip. I want to keep rolling this for a little bit too. I mean, the stuff at the beginning is already probably set up pretty good, but this stuff here at the end will probably need to be rolled for the next 30 minutes. Sometimes if the roller doesn't get in, you just have to use something a little bit pointy. If you have fingernails, they work pretty good. You can just, something to apply kind of a, you know, a localized pressure. You don't want it too pinpoint. You don't want to like jab like a screwdriver in there necessarily. I mean, you can, just you have to be careful what kind of pressure you put on it. You don't want to gouge through the material. Chopstick works pretty good. The end of a screwdriver actually works pretty good. Actually, the end of a syringe sometimes works pretty good. You can kind of dig that in. So I'll keep rolling this, but I'll go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup. So I take some Q-tips, actually bump up my air filter a notch. The glue doesn't give off quite as much fumes because it's coming out of a syringe. But when you start doing acetone, it definitely gives off a lot more fumes. You can even use this to get up a little bit of the painter's tape residue. I can still see a little bit of where it was stuck. And you want to change Q-tips fairly frequently because it just starts smearing glue around if you keep using the same one for too long. Now before I go too far, I want to put just a little bit of cornstarch on it. I don't want to do a lot because you don't want it all over the inside of this toy, but you need to do a little bit just to keep this material that you've cleaned with acetone from sticking to itself. Doesn't take much, just a little bit. Basically, it just gives it time to evaporate. So what I'm going to do, it gives the acetone time to evaporate. And then eventually, this can come off just from inflating, deflating. But for now, you can kind of see the spots where it sticks to, or the spots that could fold over and start to bond with other vinyl, and you don't want that. So it's just kind of a little temporary dusting to keep the vinyl from accidentally folding over and sticking to itself. Anywhere you clean with acetone, that's prone to happen. And until the acetone has completely evaporated. And no worries, the cornstarch comes off. Once the acetone has evaporated, it'll just rub off and it will no longer be noticeable. It's better when you're doing this not to put a lot of pressure, because you'll abrade the material and make it dull. So if you just kind of lightly brush it, you might have to go over an area a lot to get stuff off, but if you push too hard, then you're going to have a dull finish that you're going to have to deal with. You can polish it back up by going back over it lightly with acetone, and then maybe even using some toothpaste to polish it. But it's just a lot of extra work. If you can just avoid it, then you'll be a lot happier. It'll be a lot less work. It doesn't really take much. A little bit more cornstarch. Just get a little bit on my fingers, doesn't take much. And basically everywhere it sticks is spots that are still kind of wet with acetone. And once the acetone evaporates, that will brush off and it will leave nice clear PVC. We've already gone through about 8 Q-tips. I keep changing these out. Because if you don't, you'll just start spreading glue and you'll notice it. It'll just kind of smear glue around. And the idea is we're just trying to get rid of the residue and make this, this is more for aesthetics right now. So, if we weren't working with clear material and we were working on the inside, then this probably doesn't really even need to happen because you're not going to, see it. But I was asked to take extra time and do the best I could on this, so I am doing just that. It all just amounts to, how much time you want to put into doing these kind of reinforcements and repairs. Is it just something that you want to be durable, or do you, is it something that you cherish and you want it to look good? Then if that's the case, then you probably want to spend a little bit of extra time and make it look really nice. I am not doing the whole seam. This is actually just the negative curve on the neck, on the back of the neck. That was per the customer's request. Sometimes if you get used to a certain design, I don't know if the customers had one of these before and they know that that's really the only vulnerable spot. But I can tell you from other designs that I've had to fix over the years that you kind of learn like that there's certain spots and you don't really necessarily have to reinforce every seam. You can, it's up to you, but there's for sure, if you don't want to do every seam, there's for sure some that are problematic that you should go ahead and do. Like curved neck seams seem to be pretty common as far as a failure point. Where the legs attach to the body is another one. And just depends on the design. There's some designs that just have some known problem areas. Curved spots, just there's a seam that goes along a curve. That's usually a problem area. And honestly, I see some people will reinforce on the inside, some will do on the outside. This is on the inside right now because I have easy access since the neck ripped open. But I've gotten pretty good at doing reinforcements just on the outside. If you're just careful and you do a good job, you can avoid having to get into the toy, but you just have to go a little slower and try to do nice work. If you do it on the inside, then you don't have to worry. You can go faster. You don't have to worry so much about how it looks. So it just kind of depends. One thing I hate about working on a lot of the inside seams is they're usually a pinched seam that faces inward, so you have a little flap to deal with, and that sucks. I hate having to reinforce over those little flaps. So if the flaps are all generally facing inward, I'd rather do the reinforcement on the other side. If that's the outside, then so be it. I'll just go a little bit slower and just try not to make a mess and try to make it look nice. And as you can see, if you take your time, it can look pretty good. You just got to glue it edge to edge and get your technique down. Of course, I guess that's one of the other things too. If it's somebody doing it that hasn't done it a lot and you don't really have your technique down, then it might be better to do it on the inside. It's definitely something that you get better at with more practice. I have found that out. Actually kind of brushing over where I had that piece of tape. And actually, what I can do is paper towel sometimes works better if I need to do like a little bit broader area. And I don't push, because that'll usually abrade the material and leave it cloudy. So just very, very carefully just kind of rub it across. All right, so that's that. But what I want to do is go ahead and roll this a little bit more. All right. So I'm going to let that sit for a little bit, and I am going to come back on later and do this part here, which is basically going to be kind of the same thing, except for I'm going to do 2 of these strips. I'm going to do one along the inside. I'm basically going to kind of glue it up under here like this. I'm going to bring it together, and then I'm going to kind of basically glue it down as I go, and then I'll do another one on the outside. So that one's going to get basically kind of a double. And part of the reason why I do that, it's not necessarily just for strength. It's also to get a good seal. So like if you go ahead and do 2 pieces of material, and probably for this one I'm going to actually use 0.2 millimeter instead of 0.4. Since I'm doing 2 of them, I'll basically get the equivalent of 0.4, but I'll have one on the inside and then one on the outside sandwiching, and it'll just kind of guarantee that it's completely sealed the very first time. I don't have to worry about trying to deal with holes. So that's the next step, and then the very last step actually is going to be removing some of the warning labels from this using acetone. So I'll come back and do another video here in a little bit. I'm going to just let this kind of set up and check it in a little while. So thanks for tuning in. And actually, when I come back, I'll show you what this looks like once that kind of dries, and I'll take the cornstarch off of it. Yeah, yeah, it is a little bit hard. But if you go slow like I did this one, it's not too bad. It's actually not too bad. All right, see you soon.